All right, thank you very much. That's a lot of great info. Again, we are still collecting questions, so again, we'll look for someone with a basket for that. Okay, so our next speaker is Erika Mitchell. We already mentioned her a few times. She actually is our nursing director for the MS Center. She's been part of the Georgetown MS Center since 2004, so I think many of you know her well. She has sort of a not-so-interesting topic, apparently, so we'll see something.
Hello, everybody. How are you? I know it's been a long morning, so I will try to make this interesting. I know we're running a little bit late on time, but I still want to be able to give you all the information that I have to share today. So this is a little bit of information on medical marijuana, the good, the bad, and the options. So what is medical marijuana? We know that it's a substance made from the dried leaves, stems, and flowers of the female cannabis plant. So I'm going to move this a little bit. Sorry. There are two main subspecies, being Cannabis sativa and Cannabis indica. And they vary in their components, you can see in the graphs, of their chemical makeup, mainly THC in the sativa and the THC and CBD in the indica. So indica and sativa strains, they each have their own unique effects. Sativa strains are more stimulating, where indicas are generally more relaxing. And we know that cannabis has over 450 active components or ingredients, which might explain why synthetic marijuana has not seen as good results as we see with the natural occurring marijuana. But 80 of these chemicals are called cannabinoids. And this is important. You'll see on an upcoming slide why this is important. But out of all these components here, there's just a few listed here. We know that the THC and the CBD really have the most medical relevance. Okay, so talking about the two kind of major components that we see that have a positive effect in the medical world are THC and CBD. And you see this little Venn diagram here. It kind of runs a short list of effects that these chemicals have in the body. So THC is what causes kind of that high feeling that people will report, promotes a feeling of relaxation, increases your appetite, it gives you the munchies, so to speak. The CBD is really not what we call a psychoactive impact. It has an anti-inflammatory effect, combats anxiety. The anti-cancer, I wish I could strike that out. That's debatable. But really, if you see in the middle of this Venn diagram, both of these elements and enzymes, they relieve pain. They have an effect on pain. They suppress muscle spasms, and they reduce anxiety. So I talked briefly about these cannabinoids, that we know that medical marijuana has about 80 of these cannabinoids. And why is this important? Well, in order for any medication to have an effect on the body, you think about your house. You have a lock in your key, or you have a lock on your door. If it's locked, you can't get into it. You need a key to open and get into your house. So if you think about these enzymes, the THC, CBD, and there's another enzyme here, I won't go into too much detail. You think about those as a lock. And these enzymes, they need think about those as the keys, but they need a lock to go into in order to have some kind of an effect on the body. So these cannabinoid receptors, in the 90s, it was discovered that you have this entire system throughout your body, and a lot of them are located in the central nervous system. There's CB1 and CB2. And THC and CBD, CBD does not actually, the key doesn't necessarily fit into one of these locks, but it has an effect on this cannabinoid system. The THC fits directly into the CB1 lock, and that's where you have the effects, the physical effects of the marijuana. So how can medical marijuana be utilized? There's several different methods. There's vaping, which is water vapor, which is smoked. There's actual smoking. There's capsules that can be made. There's edibles. There's liquid spray, tinctures, and as well as suppositories. So I kind of want to take a little time travel trip. I don't know if anybody's ever watched that little kids show, Peabody and Sherman. They go the way, way back, and they go through history, and they learn about things. So that's what we're going to do right now with the medical marijuana. So cannabis is one of the oldest crops known to mankind, with records of its cultivation dating back thousands of years. One of the earliest references I found when I was researching this topic was back to 2900 BC, where Chinese Emperor Fu, made reference to quote-unquote ma, which is the Chinese word for cannabis, and it was used as a popular medicine. Fast forwarding in history into the 1200s, it was documented that the Egyptians actually used cannabis for the treatment of glaucoma, inflammation, and enemas. Fast forward again in our time machine to 700 BC. Venadad, which is an ancient Persian religious text, referenced bang, or cannabis, as one of the most important of 10,000 medicinal herbs or plants. So as you see a trend here, the use of cannabis over time has been used all over the world in all different ethnicities. So fast forward again in our time machine to 200 BC. And there's a neat little pot here with a pot leaf on it. No pun intended. Medicinal cannabis was used in ancient Greece for treatment of earache, edema, and inflammation. Okay, now we're going to fast forward a little bit more in time. There is also documentation that the Jamestown settlers brought marijuana to North America. And again, also in the 1600s, there was this interesting book that I found. It's really, if you look at the pictures, they're kind of crazy. But it's The Anatomy of Melancholy. Sounds like good reading. Which is an English mental health book, and it recommended cannabis as a treatment for depression. So now we're going to move a little bit more forward in time. In the mid-1800s, marijuana was actually added to the U.S. pharmacopoeia. So that's a list of medicines that are, have a proven benefit for some medical condition. And it was used commonly for neuralgias, tetanus, to treat opiate addiction, incontinence, gout, and convulsive disorders. And some of these you might have heard, well, we'll get to that. In 1911, Massachusetts became, let me back up. So here we are, the pendulum you're gonna see is gonna kind of start swinging the other way. So in 1911, Massachusetts became the first state to outlaw cannabis, and then followed by 10 more states from 1950 to 1927. In 1925, the League of Nations restricted cannabis to only scientific and medicinal use. And then in the 1930s, U.S. pharmaceutical companies, they marketed marijuana extract as just an analgesic and antispasmodic. So if you think about in history, what was happening during this time period? And if there are any history buffs here, you know that prohibition was coming around at this point. So everything, alcohol, drugs, bad, 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 bad. So and that may have had an impact on why this occurred. And again, this was really the turning point for medical marijuana. So in 1936, the traditional pharmaceutical companies, we had the advent and development of new pain medications that came onto the market. And at this point in 1936, we only had 48 states at that time. And all states had enacted laws against the use of marijuana or regulating marijuana. In October 37, interesting enough, there was the first person was arrested for and convicted under federal law for selling medical marijuana or marijuana. And then in 1942, finally, to kind of put the nail in the coffin, marijuana was officially removed from the U.S. pharmacopoeia. So this means, no, it doesn't have any medical benefit, you can't get it. And then, kind of to fast forward more in time, in the 1970s, the DEA was formed. And in 1985, Marinol was approved. And Marinol is a synthetic cannabinoid. And as I said, if we are looking at the marijuana plant itself, it has so many enzymes and components, and Marinol is just a portion of that. In the 1990s, and we had referenced these cannabinoids, this discovery of the human cannabinoid system was discovered. So that shows us, yes, you have these cannabinoids, and they actually have a place to work in the central nervous system. So fast forward again, so the pendulum is starting to swing back the other way. 1996, Prop 215 in California led to the legalization of medical marijuana, followed by many other states. And then in 2009, the American Medical Association started to encourage the rescheduling of marijuana. And even when I put together that the laws are changing so quickly, it was hard to find even a recent reference, because I think this may be outdated. And this was just a few weeks ago. But as it stands, there are 29 states, plus Washington, D.C., that have medical marijuana laws. 19 plus Washington have operating dispensaries, and 8 states plus Washington, D.C. have recreational marijuana laws. So really, more than 50% of the U.S. population now lives in a state where marijuana has been legalized. And we happen to live near 2 of them. Unfortunately, Virginia, and I can touch a little bit on that, is not up to speed. So medical marijuana and multiple sclerosis. Why do we have an interest in medical marijuana for MS? So from 2010 to 2015, there were 6 studies which compiled all together. It was over 1,500 patients, and they looked at cannabis and multiple sclerosis. So off the bat, 3 of those studies were looking at a compound called Sativex, which is an oral marijuana spray, and it's not legal in the United States, so I didn't choose to focus on those studies. But one of the studies looked at oral THC, one study looked at smoking of cannabis, and the other looked at cannabis extract. And briefly, here's a little rundown of these studies. One was done in the United Kingdom, and it included over 490 progressive MS patients. And it did not show actually a treatment effect. They were looking at will this slow down progression of disease. The second study looked specifically at spasticity. Although it was a very small study, only 30 patients, they did see a positive effect in the reduction in spasticity in these patients. And then the third study, again, was in the UK, over 270 stable MS patients, and again, they were looking at spasticity and did find that there was a reduction in muscle stiffness. So, medical marijuana program, I just wanted to kind of put it out there that we, here at the Georgetown MS Center, we do not prescribe medical marijuana. We make recommendations for appropriate patients. And having just a diagnosis of MS does not necessarily qualify you as a good candidate for medical marijuana. So who is a good candidate? We know through research that the effectiveness is primarily seen in patients who are having issues with muscle spasms and spasticity, pain, and there's weaker evidence that it can help with sleep disturbances. Research has shown that it is not effective for ataxia or difficulty with walking, tremor, fatigue, and overactive bladder. So we have many practitioners here who are registered to make medical marijuana recommendations. In Maryland, we have listed on the left and on the right here in DC, they're practitioners. And again, Virginia is not there yet. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on, if you are thinking of going down the path of medical marijuana, how would you go about doing it? So the first is to look at the Maryland Medical Marijuana Program, the process. So their qualifying conditions, really the 2 that would probably be most applicable to patients in this room is chronic pain and persistent muscle spasms. And this is kind of a step-by-step. This slide, I think, is a little bit out of order, but this is how to obtain a medical marijuana card. Now, in Maryland, it's optional to have a medical marijuana card. You actually have to pay for it, but you can be enrolled in the system and use the dispensaries without a card. But the first step is to submit an online patient application. And you are going to receive, once your practitioner has registered you in the system, you will obtain a number, and that will be included on your application. Pardon me. This is the website for the medical marijuana program. Registration, as I said, these slides will be available for you to reference after. Sorry, is this somebody's water? Is that weird if I take a sip? We're all family here. Okay. So this is a snapshot of what the Maryland Medical Marijuana Program looks like. And I was wishing it would be a little bit bigger. But the first step would be to create a patient account. There are two questions here, and I can't even see them. Is the patient under the age of 18? You'd want to click no. Is the patient in hospice care? And most everybody in this room is not. So again, you would choose no. You would complete all the required fields in this, and this includes getting pictures of your ID and listing which practitioner has referred you to the program. And that's pretty much it. It's very self-explanatory on the website. Okay, these next slides are doing something magical, and I didn't know how to turn it off. So step one, it's just to keep you interested. You're going to complete, this is for the District of Columbia. The flag has been altered a little bit. So complete written or electronic patient application as always step one, 2 passport photos, clear copy of your ID. They want to make sure you are who you say you are. And you would also have to prove residency. The electronic physician or nurse practitioner recommendation, your residency again, and then application fee. So DC does have an application fee of $100. They do have a reduced rate. And I know that some of the dispensaries in DC actually will give you store credit to reimburse you for the cost of those fees, which is kind of cool. This is the website for the DC Maryland Medical Marijuana Program. And again, just snapshots of the website. It's fairly easy to navigate. It's incredibly small, but if you have access to this PowerPoint, you'll be able to see it in real time. But basically, you want to select patient and patient application package. There are 2 ways to do it in DC. One is a paper application, the other is online. I highly suggest going online. We all know how paperwork and governments work. So electronic applications is probably your best choice. And then again, you are going to list who your referring provider is, whether it be a physician or a nurse practitioner. So how do you locate a dispensary? There's many, I love the names of these websites, they're crazy. Weedmaps.com, that's true. Potlocate.com. But these are websites out there that will actually assist you in locating a medicinal dispensary. I know that we have a lot of patients who go to Tacoma Wellness, and that organization was actually started by a nurse. Awesome. But yes. So really, that's kind of all I had for you. I hope it's not questions. Write down on your cards. But the system is very easy to navigate, and certainly if you have more questions, just go ahead and write them down. We'll address them.